Let's talk a little bit about being an instrumental band. It's immediately more challenging for you to find an audience because you have no vocalist. Do you know if that was cognizant, and has that always been cognizant for Animals as Leaders?
Yeah, it was kind of inherent in the project from the start. It was originally Tosin working with Misha Mansour of Periphery, and they were, essentially making an instrumental album.
Right.
And it was actually to fulfill a Reflux contract, if I'm
Is that right?
correct. Yeah. And I mean, they did it more like as a band thing, instead of just like the Tosin Abasi band or whatever, the guitar band. And, but yeah, I mean, we've definitely, all been about the instrumental vibes since the beginning. I'm coming from
You've been in the band for 4 years?
5 years now.
5 years, okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I come from in classic rock, blues, reggae background, but then when I was 14, I was exposed to jazz, fusion, Latin, funk stuff, and like a lot of that, fusion jazz stuff is all instrumental.
Yeah.
So, and I've always had a weird thing, which I think a lot of people do with singers.
Yeah.
Where a singer can easily turn you off and be like, I don't like that person's voice, or once in a while, I really like that person's voice, but most of the time it's a turn off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's in our benefit in that regard, but yeah, it's definitely harder when you don't have lyrics for the ladies to sing along to.
Yeah, true enough. You get a lot of ladies at your shows?
No.
I figured as much.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce Javier's name? Is it
Javier Reyes?
Javier, okay.
Yeah.
Can you describe how you met Javier and Tosin originally? Were you a fan of the band before?
I indeed was, yeah.
Okay.
And the person who recommended me was a friend from Berkeley, who we were both in the first metal ensemble at Berkeley.
Okay.
And he had this website called Guitar Messenger, and he still has it. And
Nice.
he had Guthrie Govan and all these sick ass guitar players on there. And so that's how he knew Tosin. He recommended me because I had just moved out to LA. I went to go meet Tosin at NAMM.
Okay.
And yeah, it was just what songs you want me to learn? And that was about it. But yeah, then we rehearsed for a month, or really they auditioned me for a month, and we were just getting together 3-4 times a week, going over tunes and then adding a tune, and eventually we had a whole set.
Cool. Did you have any trepidations? Were you worried that it wouldn't be a good fit, or that you might not be good enough, or any of that kind of stuff?
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's a new situation is always a challenge, and yeah, for me it was definitely that, and I mean I followed the music for a year or two before that pretty heavily,
Cool.
So yeah, I was I was literally on my list of bands, 7 or 8 bands that I was Dave Matthews, Chick Corea, Stanley Clark, these are all dudes that with Animals Leaders, Meshuggah, these are my top picks or whatever.
So you keep a bucket list? Bands that I would love to eventually collaborate with or do something with, or
yeah,
all right.
Just crossing my fingers, please, Carter Beauford, have some weird injury. Doesn't keep you out too long, but just enough for Matt Garstka to sit.
Yeah, a couple of dates. Right on.
Yeah.
This is your second album as a 3-piece that Animals as Leaders exists now.
Yeah.
Would you say that you dialogued before going in and recording any of this material about what you wanted to do, how you wanted some of the songs to sound?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a thing that happens, but it's kind of useless in a way to do that.
Yeah.
Oh dude, the next record we should make hella heavy, and just after going to a Meshuggah concert, of course you're gonna say that, and then oh dude, we should like hella groove out some shit and like play. We should hella do some dense riffs. Or like that talk. It's like when you actually get in there, it's different, you know, because you end up just kind of shooting from the hip or starting with one riff, and you know, you can force ideas or force things that you previously wanted upon the situation, or you can just kind of go with it.
Right.
And I mean, of course we dialogued before, but yeah, I think we really hit our stride. It's the first time we wrote together in a room the entire album.
See, that's awesome. I was actually going to ask that. It sounds kind of like a jam album to me, and I'm not a musician, so I'm throwing that out there going, there's some jazz elements in here. I wonder how much of this was, you know, on the floor figuring it out.
Yeah, well, in a room with a laptop.
Yeah. Well, it's everything now, right?
Yeah, but we did jam out one song, Cognitive Contortions, and that was I was like, we should really try to do this to, you know, and we came up with quite a few ideas. But yeah, it's a little bit slower process doing it in real time, figuring out stuff in real time. But it has its benefits too. That's where I come from, is doing that. So I was never like in the writing everything in the computer. I was in the, you know, doing just a musician bouncing. Let's do this. Let's do that. Okay. And having to retain all that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, that's the real challenge.
I like that you've got a track on the album. I think it's the lead track, the intro track, which is Arithmophobia. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that like a fear of mathematics and some of the structure about remembering what you're doing?
Yeah. The name kind of came after, you know, but when I thought of this idea, it was just to try to come up with patterns that fit really nicely in the 4/4, but long resolves. And then it just became, you know, I sent it to them as like a demo, like crazy shit in 4/4, and with some other stuff, and then they're like, dude, let's do that one, and I'm like, which like part of the riff or what? We should do it all, and I was like, okay, like,
all right.
This is gonna be crazy.
Lead song.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, very cool.
The track after that is Exogenesis.
Ectogenesis.
Yeah. There's a little kind of Euro industrial beat that starts that song off that I find interesting because it reminds me of like Knights or Ebb, or, you know, something that's more programmed in electronic and not so much what I consider to be your music.
Yeah. Well, there's always been an electronic element in Animals as Leaders, but yeah, I think it's definitely more groove-based, that one, you know.
And it works its way through the whole song. You didn't just like intro the tune. It's sort of, you know, it shows up and there's that kind of that chugging electronic bit that's on the back end of that song that I find interesting. It's
cool. That's Tosin's riff, you know. Like he came up with that, I guess, a while ago, years ago, and that's kind of how we started each song on the album. I mean, other than Arithmophobia, was with a starting riff from Tosin, and kind of keeping the tradition of the Animals as Leaders being, you know, based around Tosin, and then, you know, me and Javier and Tosin all working to build the song into, you know, what it is. And I was kind of like the appointed like BPM guy, like, oh, let's do it at this BPM, or we could metrically modulate to here, and if my calculations are correct, then you could play that part. And
exactly.
I was kind of that guy, you know. But it's cool because every transition, like mathematically speaking, any song is relative.
Okay.
I think is cool. You know, it gives it a flow.
Right on. Madness is the first album that you have not let go as far as mixing and production. This is entirely your album.
Yeah.
Would you say that raised any extra challenges? You really didn't have an editor. Like, you just sort of bought it all in there and did it yourselves.
Yes, it definitely has its challenges. For instance, when working with a producer, they're almost like a gatekeeper. So they're like, oh, that take wasn't good enough, or this wasn't you know. Whereas like when it's just the three of us, it's like, you know, oh no, that was good, dude. Like Tosin tends to be like, yo, that was good, man. And then like, dude, come on, let's just like just 20 more takes of that, like, you know. And so yeah, I mean, we ended up going back over a lot of the parts to try to tighten things up, because also we're not quantizing,
right?
You know, so the drums, like it's probably like 5% quantized, just like a double bass part here, it's very scattered, you know. Pretty much the whole thing is unedited, unquantized, and same with the guitars. The guitars aren't really quantized either. Maybe there's a couple sections, but yeah, because of that, it tends to, with this type of music, it tends to get loose, you know. So we really had to have as pristine takes as we wanted, but that felt good too.
Yeah.
But I think it actually is one of the coolest aspects of the album, and it's something that, you know, no one's really doing. You know, all the whole gent metal community is all about precision and, you know, quantizing everything to the grid, and it kind of makes everything stale, using all the same samples on snares, and all this stuff. It really detracts a musical dynamic element that like you hear in jazz, and like old funk records and stuff like this. So yeah, I mean, I think it was for the better, and it helped us come together as well. But we kind of realized halfway through writing all the material, like, we don't really need a producer. Like, what are they gonna add to the songs or change in the songs, you know?
You skipped that. The producer made me cry and bleed for my material, though. That phase isn't on this album, unless, you know, you're really hard on yourselves.
Yeah.
Can you talk about a little bit about inspiration? What you yourself were inspired by, and what it's like knowing that your band inspires younger musicians, and how do you think about that responsibility? Do you dwell on that? The kids are watching you and trying to replicate what you're doing?
Yeah, of course. I've felt a lot of inspiration in my upbringing, and I've had a lot of help as well. And because of that, I have inspiration deep within me. So when somebody says, you really inspired me, like, you really make a difference, like, it means something to me.
Right on.
And at the same time, I know that the guys who inspired me were the amazing greats, you know? They weren't subpar guys or guys that I was like, oh, that guy's pretty good, he makes me really want to be pretty good. So yeah, I do have pressure, put a lot of pressure on myself to give people that same experience, you know? And even if they don't play music, if they can see that, you know, I'm a craftsman and that I work at this every day and like pour my heart into it, then that will inspire them to do the same. And like now I receive inspiration from other places, just as much as from drum. Actually, probably more so now from other places than drummers. So yeah, like watching a wood craftsman, or I don't know, anything that involves an immense amount of skill that inspires me to. You know, I like the idea of being like a monk, kind of dedicating your life to something, and it's kind of romantic of you, you know.
Now, as an artist, you're creating something and putting it out there to be criticized. So I'm curious, do you read your press?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I just can't. I can't help but to.
What's the weirdest or worst review you've ever read of an Animals as Leaders song or album?
Weirdest. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there's some really weird ones. Like, but I think the best ones are like the misinformed people.
Right.
You know, like, dude, this drum sounds so fake. I'm so sick of hearing Superior. It's like, dude, there's not a single drum sample on the album where like, Javier, man, he really killed the bass this time. It's like he's the 8-string guitarist, you know, like 2 8 strings. That, I don't know. Yeah, stuff like that is really fun. Or I could really tell this one came from like Tosin, or yeah, I could really tell this rhythm came from Matt. It's like, no, actually it didn't.
Yeah. But keep thinking that.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, they're inspired, you know, they want to speculate to, but yeah, of course there's weird ones.
I'm going to make sure. What was the defining concert experience of your life? Best thing you saw live that really, you know, blew your mind?
Might have been Dave Weckl at the NAMM show like 10 years ago. Yeah, that might be it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Sabian night, you know.
Right on. What do you think is the nerdiest thing about yourself?
I don't know, probably how anal I am. Like detail oriented, and it's like I can be a sloppy dude, you know, but I mean, definitely when it comes to my craft, I'm like nerding out, like trying to program metronomes on the airplane so that I can practice to them later. And I guess if like I'm on the phone, I'm always like fiddling with stuff, making stuff really organized, and like if I'm not doing something, I like to do that. That's probably, I don't know.
I would think that almost every drummer's got to be a little OCD. I mean, look what you're doing, right? It's all precise.
Yeah, it as far as like this world goes, yeah. I mean, there's guys, you know,
right.
And I can do that at times, but like when it comes down to it, it's like, and most times I'm like trying to be perfect. Yeah.
Can you describe Tosin and Javier using only one word?
No.
All right, fair enough. What is the last piece of music that you heard that touched you emotionally?
Touched me emotionally. It was probably this Willy Wonka rendition by this girl piano player, a female piano player. Really beautiful. Probably that, or last night, you know. When playing set, I always get emotionally involved. Yeah. I don't know if that counts though.
We've already talked about Periphery. What is it you say you learn from these guys while you're out, you know, playing with them and creating with them, and you're out on the road with them? Do you feel like you're taking life lessons home as you're touring the world with them?
No. I mean, everyone has their own personality and their own things that they value, and I feel pretty content with the things I value in my life. And if anything, it kind of highlights that for me. But at the same time, I am taking home lessons in like acceptance of just different everyone's different world, you know. Everyone's living in a different kind of dream, you know. So I think on the road you're forced to be around everyone all the time, and which you don't really get in the isolation of your own home. Even when you go to work, you go home from work, you know. Here it's not like that.
You're with the same crew the whole tour, right? Yeah,
so I think you know, finding your own peace is really important, as well as having compassion for others, you know. Yeah.